The original Mirror's Edge was released in 2008 and presented a futuristic, colorful parkour playground for you to explore. And now, many years later, it's been a long wait, but Mirror's Edge Catalyst has finally hit the market. But does this prequel to the original Mirror's Edge parkour its way to the top? Or does it miss its jump and fall to its demise? In Mirror's Edge Catalyst, you're still playing as Faith Connors in the events prior to the original Mirror's Edge, giving more of a backstory not only to her, but to the City of Glass and the evil corporations and families that end up having control over it. Faith is still a runner, or someone who pretty much is a delivery person for outside organizations and works along with these rebel groups in order to try to take out some of the evil corporations that have control of this futuristic City of Glass. Without going into too much spoiler territory, there are of course connections in the story between Mirror's Edge Catalyst and the original Mirror's Edge, including with Faith's past as well as her family, but overall it's its own contained storyline that's played throughout, so if you haven't played Mirror's Edge, the original, or it's been a long time, I still feel like you can very much easily enjoy the storyline that's presented in Catalyst. And while the story is not bad by any means and gets the job done, the real draw of Mirror's Edge Catalyst and the original Mirror's Edge was the gameplay, and that parkour fun is still very much to be had while playing through Catalyst. There is an absolute ton of jumping from building to building, rolling through, doing wall runs, grabbing onto poles, and now even the addition of a grappling hook that you'll be able to swing across gaps and pull yourself up and pull down debris in order to make other platforms for you to advance. There is a ton of fun to be had just running through the city, and this time around in Catalyst, it's a much more open world experience than the more linear storytelling that was in the original Mirror's Edge, so you can do a lot of extra exploring you weren't able to do in the original game. While I wouldn't say that it's a complete open world experience, there is a pretty large map for you to explore of the City of Glass, as well as there is all the other random characters that you get to interact with. A lot of the main story characters that you'll meet throughout the main plot can also be gone back to for side quests, and they'll give them to you so you'll be able to do random other fetch quests and other things that you get to have more fun and can distract you for a short period of time before getting back into that main story. Besides those other main characters, there's also random other citizens that will give you random other delivery missions for you to do, and there is a lot of collectibles to be found throughout the entire city, so there is a lot more to do here than there was in the original game. Helping out Faith during her mission, though, is a skill tree. You'll be able to gain experience by completing the missions, side quests, finding random collectibles, and then you'll be able to use those experience points and put them towards the skill tree to improve your maneuverability, being able to unlock new cool moves like better slide or being able to wall run consistently from jumping from wall to wall, as well as also being able to upgrade your combat skills. Mirror's Edge Catalyst does not feature gunplay, which was one of the things that was a bit controversial once the game was announced. But trust me, honestly, you're not losing out much. Not only was I never really a fan of the gun combat in Mirror's Edge, in Catalyst, the combat overall works well enough in the melee style that you really won't be missing it. Much more of the game is focused on running away from enemies and getting past them and making your cool, elaborate movie-style jumps than it really is about standing still and actually brawling against the enemies that are going to be thrown at you. In fact, there's only a couple of times in the course of the entire game where you actually have to fight any of the enemies that you encounter. And while for the most part on normal enemies the combat worked fine, there was a couple of times with a couple of tougher, heavier hitting enemies, especially near the end of the game, that ended up causing me problems. There was some weird and odd hit detection when it came to hitting my character and knocking her back. Since it is a first-person perspective game, melee combat isn't necessarily the best here, and some of the AI and hitboxes when it came to those enemies was definitely hit or miss. So thankfully there was only those handful of times where I actually had to focus on combat. And though for those times, if you're running into trouble, you may want to go and gain some experience and upgrade that combat skill tree, because the ones for some of the tougher enemies are definitely worth your while. While the gunplay is gone, the melee combat that you do get to do, especially when it comes to the parkour combat, basically running along a wall and then jumping off, kicking a guy, and then continuing on your path, is really fun, and only really bogs down or becomes a hassle when you really have to fight 3 or 4 enemies at once, and you actually just have to stand there and try to do battle with them. A lot of the enemies you won't be able to simply just melee, you'll have to use the impact or strong kick attack in order to even do anything to them. But the cool factor of being able to knock them into various objects and even into one another is pretty funny and definitely has its moments. Besides eliminating the gunplay, there are a few other minor changes to the overall game, including the way the story is told. In the original Mirror's Edge, there was more of a comic book style of cutscenes that would play out for major cutscenes, but instead now they are fully acted out with 3D models. There was a handful of times where it actually stuttered a bit, and it ended up seeming like the lips were actually desynced from the actual game audio. This only happened in a handful of the cutscenes overall, but it definitely threw me off from time to time. While there is still plenty of time trials in the main plot as well as the side quests that you're going to be going through, there's also a cool new social feature that allows anyone to create their own special time trial. You set up the starting point and the end point and just see how fast you can complete it, and then put it online and see how fast other people will be able to complete the same exact course that you've set up. And in fact, when playing through the game, if as long as you have the social features on, you will actually see these random spots with the person's name that set it up or the name of the course that they set up, and then you can try to beat their particular time, and you will get some experience for doing so. When it came to the core gameplay though, it was just as fun as Mirror's Edge, and is the reason why I love that game. Even with its shortcomings, just to be able to run around the open areas and do all the kinds of crazy parkour platforming was really enjoyable, and that's still the same amount of fun I'm having here with Catalyst. Now with some more open areas, so you don't have to worry too much about going outside the bounds of the particular mission that you're currently on, just adds to the overall fun of jumping around this big futuristic city. While there was still the occasional mess up of missing a platform or the platforming not working exactly the way I wanted it to, still for the most part I was able still to easily jump from the platforms that I needed to, run along the walls and be able to grab onto poles and sometimes just make it by the skin of my teeth, and those moments were definitely exciting. I did run into a couple of clipping issues here and there with my character going through, and especially when it came to defeating enemies. It's something that I actually ran into quite a lot in the original Mirror's Edge as well. Knocking an enemy into a railing with the new kicking combat that you're able to do is actually really cool, but sometimes they may just get flat out stuck within the glass walls or railings when you're knocking them into them. Graphically, the game is beautiful, with a lot of really colorful and bright environments. The game really shines during the daytime outside segments, especially in the richer part of town with some really cool apartments and other complexes that you'll be able to run through and explore while going through your missions. Even the dark sewers and crappier parts of the infrastructure end up still being enjoyable to run through. If you're familiar with the graphical stylings of Mirror's Edge, they did that tenfold here with Catalyst, and the game is absolutely a joy to look at. While I wouldn't say it was game-breaking by any means, there were definitely some slowdown and frame rate drops at some key moments, sometimes during cutscenes causing a little bit of desync like I mentioned earlier, but also during just combat and parkouring there were bits of frame rate drop and slowdown where I was a little bit concerned, but overall it didn't take away too much from my overall experience. The game's main storyline took me about 6.5–7 hours in order to play my way through, and there is a lot of side quests, collectibles, and other side content for you to dive into during the main story or afterwards. The game doesn't cut you off once the game's plot is over. You'll be able to still explore the city and have fun running around and doing various other tasks. I did have an absolute blast running my way through this beautiful, futuristic, colorful city. Jumping from building to building, riding down wires, the new grappling hook is really fun and just adds a new dynamic to the already great gameplay that was established in the original Mirror's Edge. The story, however, is just okay at best and falls flat in certain areas. There was only a couple of the characters introduced that I actually really like. In fact, Plastic is one of the best characters in this game, if not the overall best character, as well as just overall, it's still a relatively short experience. The side quests do add a lot. Trust me, they will add some extra hours to the gameplay, but even those are just kind of bland when you end up actually playing through them. Being open world and giving you the option to explore a lot more was a huge addition and makes Catalyst still worthwhile overall. If you loved Mirror's Edge 1, you're probably going to want to still pick up Catalyst because you're probably going to definitely enjoy the core gameplay here. But in the end, I'm going to be giving Mirror's Edge Catalyst a 7 out of 10. It is beautiful and a lot of fun, but the story and just the overall content isn't quite enough to push it over the edge to a higher score. But anyway guys, that's going to wrap up this review. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoy.